Call the City of Olivet Planning Community Design Commission for April 20th, 2023 to order. Frank, will you mind calling the roll call?
And do. Member Sam Wallach,
Here.
member Daniel Rosenberg,
Present.
member Tim Spiegelglass.
Present.
Member Brian Lewis, present. Secretary Jody Rich,
Absent.
absent. Vice Chairman Carol Wagner
Present.
and Chairman Robert Jerk.
Present. Carlos, I think you had some introductions that you would like.
Yes, a couple announcements. Commission members, I'm glad to introduce Yakara Buchanan. She is our new planning and zoning coordinator, or administrator. It is a new position that was created by the city council, back in the last year's budget or the current year's budget. We're glad to bring Yakara. She comes, professionally, she was working in Georgia. So we're glad to bring her in. Her enthusiasm and interest and knowledge and planning is pretty great. So we're anxious to put her to work and all that. So if you can, well, warm welcome to Yakara. She will be assisting us through that, similar to what Bridget did before her departure, but that position still is another position that the city will fill. So it increases our planning staff and again shows the city and the cities and the council's commitment to planning. And I'm humbled and appreciate their support as they provided in the last 21 years in there. And as we go through our new strategic plan or comprehensive plan, Yakara will play a big role in that. So we're excited to bring her to our team. And if you have any questions or so, just let her know. The other is I'd like to note Darren Mann, who is our finance director, is in attendance. Darren is now serving as the city's interim city manager, and it's a very good, confident pick by the council. So we're glad he's taken the role or agreed to take that role, and he'll be serving until the council hires a new city manager, and we'll give an update on that as we conclude in the meeting during our reports.
Good. Well, appreciate you doing double duty. I'm getting a little rusty since we've had a long break, but I forgot to mention other people. City council member, our liaison, Missy Waldman's in attendance, as well as Carlos Trejo, who we just spoke. He's our City of Olivet's Planning Community Development Department's director. Don Doty, senior planner. And you already introduced Yakara. Am I saying that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, good. All right, well, thanks. Carlos, did I miss anybody else who might be online that I need to introduce?
No.
Okay, good. Okay, that being said, just for those who haven't been here before, we go over our procedures of how we do things. If there's an item on the agenda, we'll go through a staff report. There'll be questions amongst commission members with staff to kind of answer questions or, go over, different things. At that time, we typically bring on the petitioner. We also have some back and forth with commission members at that point. And then we'll have an opportunity for public comments. These are, for that specific item that's on the agenda. We do ask that you limit, the time that you speak to no more than 3 minutes to be respectful for everybody's time, as well as to make sure we get everybody's opinion heard. If there's a public comment that's not related to anything on the agenda item, we do call that next. Okay, so if there is something on the agenda, please wait till then at that agenda item. Okay. Carlos, did I miss anything?
No, sir.
The only thing I'll point out too, for those who are in attendance via Zoom, we're still doing that, I'm sure.
Yes.
We do ask you to raise your hand. There's a little icon at either the bottom of the screen. And then when you're brought on to the panel, we do ask you that you make sure that your microphone's on and your video screen is on as well. And we do ask everybody who does make a public comment to state their name and address. Okay, so just be on the lookout for that if you're on Zoom and trying to connect. We'll try to remind you, but if you can be thinking about it too, that always helps. Okay, that being said, we will move on to item number 3, which is comprehensive plan update.
Yes, Chairman, appreciate that. And sorry for the confusion there. Adding that, I want to remind commission members that we have a meeting, a joint meeting with the city council next Thursday, April 27th at 7:00 PM. Where the planning consultants will be coming in to go over visioning exercises with both commission and council members in there. If you are unable to attend, please let me know in advance in there, and then we'll be sending out some homework, I believe, before the end of this week. So you have advanced time to take a look at the information and the activities that would be going on next week. The other thing I do want to, inform all the residents and people here that are in attendance and those online to engage in our comprehensive plan update. And this is your opportunity to influence the vision of the future of this community in there. The website is at olivetcomplan.com. On there are various activities, surveys that you can engage in to provide input at this moment of the planning process. This planning process will go in through all the way to December. And there will be various opportunities to engage in the plan and participate one-on-one or further in the planning process. Our first community visioning workshop is scheduled for Thursday, May 18th, 2023 at 6:00 PM. There will be an opportunity to watch presentations twice through that, and then other activities that you can engage in and participate in that process to make sure your voice and your concerns are listened to and heard in this process. I'll note to date, we've had over 800 clicks onto the website, which is great, but doesn't necessarily tell me, how engaged they were through that, through just getting on that click. But over nearly 180 people have taken the surveys, or the first survey that was in the website. And I'm happy it's a good number, but we want to increase that number, and we really want you to participate through that process in there, because it does give us the direction in terms of how we craft, look, review, and advocate for the future of the community, and influences our vision. It is an important document, in this process, and it's something that this commission is a steward of, and then of course staff assists you in that process. So again, engage in the website, and put March 18th in your calendars. It will be a community opportunity to attend and participate in that process with our consultants. It will be the first of several.
And just to add on to that, the surveys are well crafted. They don't take that much time to do, but they do make you think. And I think they're really well done. So definitely encourage everybody in attendance. Obviously, you're in attendance, so you care about the city, and everything. So please take a look at that. All right.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, we'll move on to public
Miss-
comments. Oh, Missy, go ahead.
Carlos, could you clarify that also happens to be a night when it's typically a planning community design commission night? This is totally separate from the meeting, and so we will still have a meeting on the 18th of May, or?
I have to take a look. I believe it's a separate night.
Okay.
In there, and it may be that the initial May meeting is at a later date. So this should not
Okay.
conflict with
Shouldn't
that.
impact. I did
Double
want to,
check. I didn't have my
yeah.
calendar with me at this time.
I did want to mention that the first survey will be available until the end of May. And there will be a follow-up survey. It's important to lend your voice to the surveys, and if you cannot, especially if you cannot participate in the workshops, it's putting your voice in, even if you participate on a daily basis. Becoming a part of the document and lending your vision and your opinion to it is really an important step in being a part of it. I'll step off my soapbox now. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to public comments. Does anybody have any public comments that are not related to any agenda items? Or, also in the attendance as well as online? If you're online, please raise your hands. We'll give it about 30 seconds to kind of see. I don't see anybody raising their hand or
Thank you, Chairman.
motioning here in the audience.
No, sir.
We'll give it 10 more. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Item number 5, old business. This is item A 9270 Olive Boulevard Sunrise Dispensary. Carlos?
Chairman, this matter was introduced to the commission back in January of 2023. It was a petition to operate a full dispensary, including adult use, recreational, and medical marijuana at the facility address at 9270 Olive Boulevard. It is an authorized use as called out under our Chapter 50 marijuana facility provisions in there. The site property is zone COR, commercial office retail, considered a non-residential district, and the use under Chapter 450 is permitted, subject to a special permit review process in there. So I want to note it is an authorized use on the site grounds, but it is subject to a special permit review in there in an effort for the commission to recommend to the council any mitigation efforts for the use on that. The project's been before you a couple of times. There's been opportunity for public comments to be introduced in there and discussed, and we went through the process of Amendment 3 and the state statutes, and then also our Chapter 450, and then our code and such in there. The commission then authorized myself as staff to solicit a traffic analysis or review of that, more specifically to the generation trips on the site and how does that compare. And we did hire an outside consultant, Lockmuir Group. Lockmuir has done several projects for the city of Olivet, including our Olive Boulevard master plan, which helps with manage access along the Olive Boulevard corridor in there. They were also doing a study for the city of De Pere, also looking at dispensaries and the type of trip generations that those dispensaries use. In addition to that, for De Pere, they were looking at some national standards. They were looking at the ITE manual, which is their group of traffic engineering analysis and codes for all types of uses, and dispensaries being a newly added item in the most recent version. And then they were also looking at the data that was provided by the petitioner here at 9270 Olive in there regarding his other sites throughout the state of Missouri. In such, the report had indicated that their findings would be that based on the peak hour, the number of stalls on the site would be deficient by 1. Based on the volume that was projected by the petitioner, the amount of time it takes for a customer to go through in there in a peak hour, and I'll stress that peak hour, the site, I believe, has 13 stalls. Well, the site has 13 stalls. They would be short 1 stall for that peak hour to be able to accommodate the number of patrons that would be attending at that peak hour. In addition to that, there would be the necessary stalls for the employees that would be that needed to be considered as part of the process. I'll note that under our current zoning code, the dispensary falls under the classification of retail, and it is compliant with the parking requirements that are governed on the code. The special permit process, again, gives the community, the city, some flexibility to look at that impact, to consider, the trip generations that are just like the Lockmuir had put together, and allow that in the deliberations and the consideration of the special permit request. So there's a couple of things we can go and discuss about that, because I think, through this, it would be prudent for the commission to consider that, some additional stalls need to be added or be accessible to the site. Now, the code says what is required on site is met, and I'll stress that. The analysis we conducted noted that at a peak hour, we would be short 1 stall and then the stalls for employees. The code allows additional stalls to be considered for the site. Now, these are not required stalls. These are now additional stalls through the special permit process. But they have to be within 300 feet in close proximity in there. The commission has the authority and the leeway to consider whether those stalls are fully accessible or not and could accommodate the site for that process. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in there. In addition, I asked Lockmuir to look at the 3 entrances to this site. The entrance on the west off of Dolores, the entrance on the north off of Olive Boulevard, and the entrance off of the Shops of Christ Crossing, which is a cross-access easement that we obtained following the vision and the objectives of the comprehensive plan in there. And that provided this site with the opportunity of providing some cross-access to get to the intersection of Price, which is a signalized intersection. So that being said, they looked at the three sites. Of course, we heard from the residents in the Dolores Kenneth neighborhood concerns about the traffic that would be in there. And I'll note, I mean, we are aware that Kenneth and Dolores at the intersection of Olive have long wait periods. I mean, it's not the ideal intersection. Neither are many of the other intersections along Olive. Olive was built and has been expanded, for the past several years. We've also allowed new housing on Dolores and increased the number of housing units that are on the street. And we've also zoned corner properties on Dolores for commercial use. This site has been vacant for the past couple of years, but prior to that, it was an office use in there. And we are aware, and that's why our comprehensive plan through the planning process, encouraged us to obtain a cross-access easement on Price Road or off of the Shops of Price Crossing to help facilitate that type of traffic, to provide an additional option to get to Price without having to get onto Olive if you lived on Dolores or Kenneth, or if you were going to the dog park or Irvside Park, that you can actually get to those sites without having to get onto Olive by crossing through, whether it's this site or the Shops at Price Crossing site. So those are, the city has worked diligently to improve the access at Dolores and Kenneth and the intersection at Olive, but not just that street. We've been doing that in all our streets, knowing that running cul-de-sacs off of a state highway and the number of aprons we have on Olive Boulevard are not the most conducive to managing traffic on Olive in there. In their review, while Lockmuir recognized, the 3 access points onto that, they recommended that they saw that the entrance off of Olive Boulevard is too close to the Dolores intersection, and that could pose confusion to the traveler, not knowing, thinking that somebody's turning right at the intersection or right into that site, that there would be that unknown in there because of their close proximity. It's not a full car length. They're literally right adjacent to one another in there. And they recommended from a safety perspective that the commission should consider the closure of that entrance, solely looking at it from the safety perspective. They were sensitive to the notion that residents on Dolores and Kenneth are concerned about the volumes of traffic that they already have with or without the site being developed in there. But it is the design of that intersection and its proximity to is the design of that apron and its proximity to the intersection that's the bigger concern, and that's to the community as a whole, not to the neighborhood as the individual streets. So it gets back to, in terms of the review and where we are at this point, because we've had several discussions with the petitioner, and we've had public input throughout the phases of this review. And again, it goes down to, this is an authorized use. I mean, the city council, through its adoption of chapter 450, indicated that dispensaries are allowed in non-residential districts, which means in the industrial parks and along the Olive Boulevard corridor. The council was not selective of which streets should have them and which streets shouldn't in there. They allowed that opportunity throughout that corridor for consideration. But they did, place a caveat that they should be reviewed under the special permit process. So that additional consideration can be taken, not necessarily about whether this is the appropriate spot, but how to mitigate impacts that each individual spot would have to its surroundings. It's not about whether it's in this block or the other block, or whether it's in a residential street or not. These are all public streets, and majority that we have here on Dolores. The grounds itself are compliant with the COR district. They meet the minimum requirements, and the property is a built property in the COR, and the COR permits this type of retail activity through Chapter 450. The parking that's required by code is compliant with code, but we know that through the analysis that was conducted by Lockmuller, it would behoove the city to look for some addition, to require some additional parking be accessible to this use or this site in there. And through the special permit process, there are different alternatives or means that can be done. They buy more property and expand, or they solicit or get into agreements with adjacent property owners in there. But what is not acceptable, and I'll stress, and I think through the Lockmuller report also indicates, is that, parking in the streets is not an acceptable means to generate more parking stalls or spaces. And they recognize that the conditions on Dolores and Kenneth, that the streets were narrower than what the standard would be. But those are all pre-existing, and we're not looking to make those changes in there or change the character of the neighborhood in any form or way. But we would not permit or consider, a private operation to utilize, our public streets for their necessary parking. So that being said, again, there are other options that the petitioner can look to, and the commission can consider if feasible, if additional parking can be secured onto the site grounds. All that being said, and looking at everything that we've discussed since January, the most important thing is, how does it further the vision of our comprehensive plan? And I think really that's where we're at, and that's where I'm looking for guidance on the commission. The building has been vacant, and whether it's our comprehensive plan going back all the way to 2006, or considering the catalyst strategy for the economic redevelopment of the Olive Boulevard corridor in 2018, the conditions of this site are unacceptable. Maintaining the status quo is not in the best interest and does not further the vision of our comprehensive plan. And what's being proposed, again, I know it's a sensitive subject, given its use and such, but it's authorized. In there is, from our perspective, is, what makes the investment in this site, not necessarily the use, the investments in this site consistent in furthering our goals and our visions of being dynamic, the dynamic sense of place. And I think in the analysis and review of what's been submitted to date, again, that's what's missing. Lack of a better word, where's the wow factor of seeing reinvestment in there? And it's something the commission needs to be sensitive, because again, the status quo is unacceptable. This site needs to be improved, and if this user is not approved or authorized, then the next user needs to do something in there. Again, the goal of the comprehensive plan is to improve the Olive Boulevard corridor. It's not necessarily to limit uses in terms of what's authorized by the council or not. It's not a tool for that. It is about furthering the vision of creating a dynamic corridor in there. And so when I look at this, again, a couple of things as we consider the special permit request. The location, that decision has been done through Chapter 450. The use in itself has been allowed through Amendment 3 and has been incorporated into our zoning ordinance. The parking, under our current code, is compliant, and it behooves us to go back if we want to call out dispensaries separately to do so, but not in the process or in the middle of the process. The special permit process gives us that ability to make that an issue and a request that they need to verify or provide additional parking, whether on or off the site, in there, but not through our streets. The issue regarding safety, which is a very, reasonable issue and concern. Our ordinance, our chapter 450 goes above and beyond what the state requires. And it will require the chief of police to do the final review and provide the final recommendations to what they perceive are the best points and methods to ensure that it is compatible with the community and safe for the community. And there, I understand the concerns on the values of property or conducive to robberies or break-ins and all that. Those things happen, and it's an unfortunate pandemic that's going on throughout the region right now with this. And it's not just dispensaries. I spoke with the owner of the St. Louis Dance Academy. And the reason was because I got a complaint about lights. And in our discussions is because they've been having break-ins in their site. But just because they're having break-ins, we're not going to go to our ordinance and prohibit dance academies in that process. It's not rational in there. So we work with them to mitigate some of the light issues and concerns off of some of the neighbors on their eastern side, and they did so, and so far everything's been pretty good. So at this point, we've provided you the analysis. We looked at the traffic study. The traffic study did point out some issues that the commission needs to consider and discuss. But ultimately, again, as the commission assesses this, is going back to the comprehensive plan and looking at the improvements that are proposed and determining, does that further our vision? Do we see, a step forward in there? Because again, maintaining that status quo, the site looking like the site does now, I don't think is consistent or furthers the strategic plan or comprehensive plan goal in there. I have a couple of slides, Chairman. Again, back in January 19th, we had the opportunity for public comment, and we codified the comments that were in there. The commission has had discussions with that. We've had discussions with the petitioner on that. We've had discussions with staff, including fire, police, public works, about the comments that were noted throughout the process. We heard and listened to what our residents had to say and make sure that we had those discussions and hopefully engaged, those improvements in there. Petitioner has come back with revisions. They're adding the screen buffer wall. They're adding the decorative landscape wall along Olive. But remember, those are code requirements. Those are not going above and beyond and being dynamic. Those are things that we're going to have to be done anyway. They provided that cross access to try to address the issues with the street. You have the last set of revisions, and that's what we have here. The challenge with a special permit is always the chicken and the egg aspect in there. It's like, to engage and into further detail, or let's say architecture or landscape design in there, there's still a big risk of, but I don't know that site is going to be permitted. We had that same issue with the dog park, and traditionally in the past, we've allowed petitions to be acted on a conditional permit on a conditional basis. That way that the actual consideration of the use itself can go through the process and be reviewed and through the council. And then if authorized, with the expectation that they're going to come back now that they know that the site, would allow what they're looking to do, but now do the investment and do the designing, but knowing that they had to come back to the commission with the expectations that are noted through those discussions and the discussions that take place in there. So that's all I have in there. I've given you a summary regarding the information we've received in there. The petitioner is in attendance here. Again, we do have a additional. I'm sorry, I should have. We do have a rendering of the building in there, and I'll bring that up in a second in there. But again, there was no major modification in there. It was looked at the colors of the building are a little bit, are a little bit different, a little bit quieter on there, and I'll bring those up as the commission has discussions.
Is this in our packet?
Yes,
The
yes,
picture?
it's, there you go. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
No worries, no worries. And what we're seeing on the packet is the backside, basically.
You would be looking at the same angle that I have here on the slide projector. And there, and I'll get that up for you in just 1 second so everybody can see. Here we go. So it's almost the same perspective review that I have in there.
Okay.
And again, it goes down to that question, and I appreciate the effort that the petitioners put in there, but you look at the existing structure on the lower right-hand corner of the monitor, and you looked at the proposed rendering, and really got to ask yourself under that comprehensive plan, does this really further the vision in there? What is the dynamic aspect of that in there? This building needs attention. This site needs to get developed and reused in there. But I think here's an opportunity to further our vision in there, but looking for more investment either to the exterior or to the landscape, especially the corner. Something similar to what we did with the CVS or with McDonald's across the street. And it doesn't necessarily reflect everyone's personal preference, but the intent and purpose of being somewhat dynamic or doing something is in those developments.
Go ahead, Carol.
Carlos, has the developer indicated that they are interested in trying to expand the site to accommodate additional parking?
No. And unfortunately, it's pretty landlocked. And, go back to, if you recall, back in 2004, when we had the Price of Shops Crossing development, because it kind of alludes to some of the history of what happened here. The goal with the Shops at Price Crossing was for a future expansion westward, to take over Dolores. And there are illustrations in our comprehensive plan back from 2006 that show that that area of Dolores and Kenneth would be redeveloped for mixed use purposes in there. There were variances that were granted to the Shops at Price Crossing for the purpose that we had expectations that there was not much redevelopment interest in those two streets in there. But over time, starting in 2006, 2007, we had two houses were built through a subdivision. And since then, we've had reinvestment, residential reinvestment in those two streets in there, including the 3 new houses that were added to Dolores, and which represented 2 additional homes compared to the original home, and then investment up in Kenneth, where the street is kind of was gravelled at points in there. So going back to that, the opportunities for expansion of the commercial area are pretty limited now. And I don't think that, given the investment that's been placed, and then having the public street of Dolores and the adjacent neighbor, that property has sold, and there's a new property owner at that southwest corner in there. They've made some investments into their building that scenario under the comprehensive plan would ever come to fruition. Does that answer? I mean,
I think it does. I have one other question. When Lottmuller said that the site was short for peak hour parking that it might need, okay? We're talking about customer spaces and employee parking.
that customer space, that in that one peak hour, under
Okay,
the current conditions and analysis, that there would be a stall short to be able to accommodate the trip volumes that would be generated on a facility of this size on that.
Is
okay.
that on the current sales quotes or what they were hoping to expand to?
On the maximum, they were looking at what the maximums were at this point.
Okay.
So I would let the petitioner, address that. But Lockmuir also looked at what other dispensaries, there was 4 in the St. Louis area, what they were generating. Looked at, nationally at some other sites and then under their manual. So it's, it's a tough question to answer. I know what you're saying, and I couldn't tell you, a yes or a no, but it was under the assumption again of that peak based on the numbers that were given.
Current or, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
Just to clarify on the report I read before is when it says 55 in and 55 out, it's this like saying 55 cars come in and the same 55 are going out. It's
That
not-
is correct.
Okay, okay. And that's why they said 14, because if it's turning every 15 minutes, 14 would be just over the 55.
That is correct.
Okay. I understand in everything you said that this is authorized within the zone, the parking meets the code, those aren't in question. But it is up for a special permit. So I guess what I'm curious about is under a special permit, what purview or what options do we have? So as an example, I understand they're saying close Olive, and I understand why they're saying it, because I can see the right-hand turn. But on the flip side, now that would increase the factors into Dolores, right? Which has been a large concern from the residents, and I understand why. And it increases significant traffic. So I think about the residential. So I'm curious under the special permit, then, do we, just to be candid, do we even have the option of saying, okay, well, it meets the code. So we don't have an option to say we require 20 spaces or one more. I don't know what the answer is. Because again, it'd be different if it was a bank where we're not expecting a lot of volume and parking wasn't gonna be an issue versus if it was a Chick-fil-A drive-in, drive-through where it's gonna back up on Dolores. And then now we've got people on Dolores who can't even get in maybe because it's backed up. So as much as it might might reach the code, it might be within the parameters. When do we get to use special discretion to say this causes a problem? Because it could impact the comprehensive plan if we're now backing up on all, as an example. So I'm just curious what's even in our power or purview. if that
I
makes
think
sense.
you can, the commission through that special permit process is authorized, to have that discussion, to take those matters into consideration, whether they're code required or not. You heard, comments from the public regarding their thoughts on the use and all that. You have the ability to take those into consideration. You've heard from the petitioner, you had the ability to take those into consideration. You've asked for a traffic study or analysis in there, and you have the authority to take that into consideration in your decision-making process. The worst case is that the commission doesn't even talk about it at all, but I think we have, and then we're bringing this information to you that, the traffic analysis is indicating that at that peak hour, there's not enough, they're a stall short and they don't have enough parking for the employees to be accommodated for that size of a building. So
Not even employees, we're talking just customers even.
that is correct.
Employees, we've always assumed are somewhere else, which is an open question for safety to me, because
Correct.
let's say there hasn't been announced this way, but let's say they've agreed to parking price, crossing. I'm not saying that's true or not, but then people are walking, at that point, does that create a safety concern? So I guess I would ask the council as a question, do we have concerns like if we close Olive, which I understand why, I don't like it, but I understand why. Now we're backing up Dolores, right? Potentially. And I look at it, potentially, maybe not, but I think it's worth having the conversation. And then I'm also be curious to know from Price Crossing, how comfortable are they with traffic in and out of there, or people parking in there? Because I think it will happen. So those are things I'd like to do.
Well, and I think that just to make sure you have that ability to keep under consideration. Again, the extra stall or the employee stalls, where are they and are they secure? As first, it needs to be verified in there. The closure of Olive, that would be contrary to a lot of the comments that I heard from the public, primarily the residents that lived on Dolores in there. Now you have a consultant saying you should close it because it is a safety issue, concern. You have residents saying, we don't want the traffic is an issue for us.
But they're maybe looking at it from a traffic safety, not a quality of life.
Correct, but through the special permit process, you have the ability to mitigate those things that, which one outweighs
Yeah.
The other, your decision is, you know, is open in there, but you should have that discussion, you know, in there. You're not tied or beholden to the analysis of the traffic consultant, nor are you tied or beholden to the concerns, you know, that were noted about, you know, it's hard to get out onto Olive Boulevard. But I think the special permit requires you to take both of those into consideration and forward to the council what you believe is the best solution, you know, in there. Is it one or the other? It's both, you know.
And not to put everyone on the spot, I'm kind of curious what others' thoughts are. Am I the only one who thinks that that's a concern or?
Closing that entrance.
Well, either closing that, okay, if we leave both open, I recognize the traffic concern. I think their study makes sense. If people, someone coming down eastbound on Olive might have a right-hand blinker, somebody, you know, on things they're turning right into Dolores, and so the Dolores person turns right and know they're going into the entrance. Seems legitimate to me. But my concern is with those Olive, then people are going down Dolores, and what if the parking lot's full? Or someone's backing up and now we're backed up on Dolores and then we're backed up into Olive, which creates a whole different safety concern. Because the entrance is only 2 part down, I think, right? So, yeah, just curious what others think.
Chances are, if people are looking for a spot and they're missing one spot, they're just gonna be circling that building.
Potentially, if they can get in, yeah, agreed. If someone's backing up right near the entrance.
All the way up, you know, on Dolores and back it all the way up onto Olive. I don't think it's gonna be, you know, necessarily happen. You know.
Well, I think the more concern is if it was backed up on Dolores already and people trying to take that left in there and there's a car blocking it.
Yeah.
Would be, that's
Oh,
where.
that's
that-
true. People
that
can't
would-
turn right because there's extra traffic and there's
And
caution.
they're gonna take.
And,
a
or
left.
making a left on Olive, which is tough in the afternoon, so now they can't make a left, so people are stopped to make a left. Or they keep driving down Dolores, which isn't what we don't want either.
Right.
So,
It seems likely to me that whether there's a real path there or not, if people see it's backed up, they're gonna park in the parking lot next door
Oh, yeah.
and just walk
totally
across
agree.
to it. I mean, especially
Poss-
after the first time somebody sees that, right?
They stop even trying.
They're not even gonna try. They're gonna say there's this great big parking lot right next door. I'm just gonna park there.
And then they're
walk
walking up a ramp possibly, which is dangerous, or maybe they're making on the sidewalk, hopefully, but. Those are my concerns, I guess.
Posing on a shopping center that's already too busy.
Yeah.
At the busiest time, which is Friday afternoon, maybe, or, yeah.
I have a concern about the parking. The site is confined and yeah, I wish there was a way to, because I have no problem with the use itself, really, but if we have a consultant telling us that it's probably overparked, you know, there's gonna be peak times where there aren't places for these cars to go. To me, that's a problem, because the impact of that falls on the neighborhood behind it, we're trying to protect, and Olive Street Road, or an already overburdened shopping center. And none of those are good options, as far as I'm concerned. If you can't handle your own parking, where's it go? And that's, to me, is a problem. Yeah, I would think it'd be a problem for the business because that would limit their own growth, which I would think is
Well,
a
I hope
problem,
people
but that's their decision. I'm more concerned about what happens when we hit that peak. How does that impact the neighborhood and how does that impact Olive Street Road? And I don't see a workable way around that from what our consultant has advised us. I wish there was, because I'm thrilled that an investor is interested in bringing a new use to Olive Street Road. I think that's an exciting thing.
To your point on the wow factor, it'd be nice if there was difference on the building, but I'd rather have somebody in the building than no one, you know, in that point. Chairman, I'm curious what Price Crossing thinks about all this, because the easement's gonna go there, and there's a chance, I'm not saying there will be, but I'm curious if that's worth bringing up.
Well, I think that's a good point, and we do have a member in attendance from Price Crossing. However, I do think it's probably time for us to bring on the petitioner. Makes sense. And then we can maybe inquire, so.
On. Now it's on.
Very good.
Thank you for having me back again.
Remember to
To
state
those of
your
you who
name
are
and Address. Remember to state your name and address for the record.
Neil Minor with Agrigenesis, business address is 9270 Olive Boulevard. And thank you for having me back. For those of you who are new, very nice to meet you. It has been 7 weeks since the last time I was in front of you. As you know, the adult use cannabis in Missouri became legal for sales on February 2nd, and it has evolved quite a bit since February 2nd. It's kind of ironic that today is April 20th, which in the cannabis industry is kind of like the Super Bowl. I don't know all the backstory about that. I just know that today, last time I checked, right before I came into this meeting, we had our biggest sales day that we've ever had in the history of our company. With that being said, we have a new director of retail operations. He spent the day in Kansas City, which is our busiest location. He implemented some new procedures there. We've really been pushing online ordering and online pickup for the past 7 weeks. And our transaction time was less than 15 minutes in Kansas City today. That location only has 8 parking stalls, and all day today, they never ran into a parking or traffic situation at that location. I'm not saying it can't ever happen. I'm just saying today was the day that was the biggest day of cannabis sales in the state of Missouri, and we had no traffic or parking issues at any of our locations. To address the issues that came out of the traffic study, our civil engineer is here with me tonight. He's seen the traffic study. He's heard all of your comments. I'm going to ask that he go back and look and see, even if all the boulevard were closed, could we get one more parking stall into that lot? I don't know where you would put it, but I'm going to ask him to look at that. As a company, we're going to have a discussion about if we are forced to close the Olive Boulevard location. Is this still a place where we want to operate? It's just an internal discussion that we're going to have where we're going to have to talk about the implications that would have to our business. Pushing all of that traffic onto Dolores does not, in my mind, seem like a good idea at all. But at the same time, we still think that Olivet, it would be a great community to operate in, and we'd love to be able to operate here if we can work out all the details. Carlos and I did have a conversation. He kind of told me what he was going to present tonight. He did talk about the dynamics of the Olive Boulevard corridor. We're certainly, I think that we've shown that we're not opposed to taking your ideas and suggestions and implementing them. And we're certainly not opposed to doing more to that site to make it fit into your vision of what you want your community to look like. I'm not a design person myself, so I can't make ideas and suggestions. Either someone within our company can do that, or we'll hire someone to do that. And we'll also listen to any ideas and suggestions that you have on that. Regarding employee parking, I don't have anything signed yet, so I can't present that to you yet, but we are in discussions and negotiations for 7 parking spots for our employees, and it is not at Price Crossing. And we will post signs on our side of the property and on the Price Crossing side of the property that's absolutely will not allow our employees to park at Price Crossing, and we do not want our customers to park there either. I know that, having the cross access is going to have traffic going back and forth between the 2 parking lots. We will have signs on our side of the parking lot that says no dispensary parking at Price Crossing. It's not going to be an option. And, we'll work with Mr. Yawitz however we need to make sure that gets enforced as well. Okay. So I think I addressed the issues that he had up there, but any other questions from anyone?
Does anybody have any other ideas, for the building or, for that dynamic aspect? Go ahead, Missy.
It is very rare that I will ask, but Carlos, and I think this board has heard me bring this up before, the dormers. I don't know what our police department has given in any of their thoughts with regard to safety with those dormers. Yes, we all saw on the news that the university dispensary attempted to be broken into, and the videos clearly show that they could not do that. However, they didn't have what I consider to be an opening on a roof. And this still concerns me, but it's something that I don't know what our police chief and law enforcement and public safety officers have looked at and whether they're okay with that.
And it's something that we've discussed and noted in their attention. They haven't gone through to review the final set and the internal layouts in there since the original submission, which was, again, they started off with a western entrance, hearing the comments and noting what was listened to from that first meeting, switched and reset the entrance to the east in there, but we haven't looked at any additional revisions or how that site plan would work. And you do have a copy of that in your packet of the original internal layout in there. I would assume that a lot of it will still be mirrored in that process, but it would be something that we would bring to that attention in there. And then with Mr. Minor, we've talked about how those are, whether they would be concealed or on the roof in there, and then, but we haven't looked at how they impact the internal aspect of it.
So our original plan was to put the sign of our location covering up those windows, because we don't want, skylights are not a good idea to have in a dispensary. Although even if someone were to try to get in through the light, they can't actually get access into the building, and it would be a complete dead end for them. It's just it's an invitation, and we don't want those up there either. After Carlos let us know that we can't have a sign on the roof, the backup plan would be to, I don't know if they can be completely removed. I'm sure they probably can, but they would be covered. The glass would be removed. We don't want to invite people to try to climb up on our roof and access our building.
Anybody else? I got a few, but
The only thing I would say is, I would like to see the siding kind of removed. It's 70s looking, and new facade on it. I would say that would be my suggestion, to make the building look nicer, stone or something like that, things like that.
Okay. Yeah. In addition, to what Carlos said, what Tim just said, I think I would like to see more improvements that rather than just paint, on there. At some point, I want to see the other side too, which is going to be your main entrance, sort of rendering there. I think it would also be nice to add some signage for the residential area that starts with some other descriptions on there, for residential parking only, but something to distinguish, okay, this starts the residential area, to try to prevent people from potentially driving through there. And, like I said, you got to improve the parking issue first. I mean, that's going to be the number one thing, I think, is you're going to have to address.
Okay.
So, see if I had any other notes. No, that's what I had. Anything else? Anything else? Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, at this point in time, we usually call on public comments, but I am gonna ask, Greg Yowitz in the audience, if he wouldn't mind coming up, just to get his perspective, on that cross-axment agreement.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Greg Yowitz, 9200 Olive, owner of Price Crossing, developer of Olive Crossing, 30-year resident of Olivet. So yes, I have a lot of thoughts. Would you like to hear them?
Yes.
Certainly. Okay. So number one, I am totally fine with the use, right? I think that the use is, it's legal, it's retail. If it doesn't go here, it's going to go somewhere else. And it's not for me an issue, even being the neighbor next door, right? I don't have any big scary fear of the customers. My wife used to go pick up medical marijuana for my father-in-law before he passed away. And, you know, she was in there, in and out in 7 minutes. I sat in a car, right? The little center now down at Shoots and Olive. So I don't have any questions about the use. We've talked about the cross-access easement, which we granted when we built Price Crossing almost 17 years ago, which sounds crazy. And my only concerns really about the cross-access are that it be done in a way that doesn't make a water issue on my side of the line. Number one, and number two, is I've talked with Neil and their team. Unfortunately, I don't have the parking to give, right? There's probably times of some days, maybe that it's available, but what I can't do is compromise my tenant's ability to park. And hopefully, and I can't say too much right now, is I have a tenant that we're about to sign to take the old credit union space, and it's retail. So the reason I mention that is if there's concern about the cross-access drive, we intend to stop using the drive-through. The retailer will not need that drive-through. So that gives me even less concern about their cross-access easement, because we won't have that conflict we used to have with all those cars backing up from Vantage Credit Union. If you ever saw Payday Friday, right? There were 12, 14 cars in line dropping checks off through the drive-through. That's over now. That's going to probably be covered parking for the tenant and one or two of their employees. So I think it's a mechanical thing with the cross-access easement. I very much appreciate the signage they're going to put up, and, you know, we're going to have to talk about it if people start repeatedly violating it. I happen to have high definition cameras, so we'll be able to see if people are doing what they're not supposed to do. And Neil and I will talk about it, I'm sure, and work something out. On some of the thoughts that I heard tonight, I just thought I'd render my opinion since I'm here and I can. I'd say being one stall short on the parking for the customers, I wouldn't actually give too much credence to, because currently there's a boom in Missouri because marijuana sales are brand new at the retail level. When all the other stores open and all the other stores convert, sales levels are going to normalize. And I just can't see there not being enough parking there during the day, number one. Number two, I'd say from a planning standpoint, I would not be in favor as the neighbor of taking down a home to add more parking. Right? I don't think that's what we want to do in Olivet, is knock out what is really a reasonably affordable home site to add parking because they might be one stall short. And the reason I say that is, just so you know, in traffic modeling, because I pay for a lot of traffic modeling in my projects, traffic models still predict that car counts on all roads grow 2% annually. Well, if you look at Olive's traffic count over the last 15 years, it's lower than it was 15 years ago. So how does that work, right? So I'm not saying that Lockmueller's report is incorrect. I'm saying it may not be fully factually accurate to the reality of the world, because modeling is modeling. It's a guess. What might happen in San Diego is not necessarily what's going to happen here, because the densities per square mile of people are completely different. So I would be opposed to that. I also have concerns about closing Olive. I think you're going to the point that Brian made, you're going to then put those cars in conflict with the Dolores traffic, and those people already have a challenge getting in and out. I think logically, most people are going to enter either through their entrance, they're going to come through mine, because my entrance is 3 lanes wide. And that's, people are going to form a pattern, right? The first couple of times is going to be a little awkward. And that's what the cross-access point is for, is to get people off of Olive. And so I think they're going to come in through Price Crossing, they're going to hang a right, they're going to shoot across my lot, park in their lot. And when they leave, depending on which direction they're going, especially if they're going to go left on Olive, they're going to cut through my lot, go up to Price. And that's the better, safer traffic move in the first place, number one. And number two, I would just say, as a landowner, if you were going to require that again, which I don't think you should, it should only tie to this special use permit and not permanently impact Mr. Turk, who owns the building. He shouldn't lose his access point in perpetuity, because what's the next use if this goes away? And so I just thought I'd mention that. And lastly, what else do I have to say? Oh, and this is just my personal, take this as an opinion. If Neil and his team had filed a business license application when they actually signed their lease in the summer of 22, they wouldn't be here for a special use. And while I completely support trying to enhance that building and get a, somewhat better look, don't squeeze too hard or the balloon pops. And what do we get? The same yellow ugly building, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think the windows were taken out of the dormers. I tried to pull it up on my cameras, but it's too dark right now for me to see that far. I don't want that ugly yellow building the way it is to remain. So I just, again, don't just open the door, but consider when you're asking them for upgrades. And I think Neil sort of hinted about it. There's a point at which it doesn't make any sense to do. And again, this is not a criticism, it's just sort of what it is. I saw earlier that the last meeting was in January. What's April, right? Let's get them in business. Let's get them generating revenue. Let's get them in physically improving that building. And let's, you're never going to get perfect. The lot's not redevelopable in itself. You can't tear the building down and build anything. With the setback, you're actually almost in the next property line, the setback off of Olive. So this building is what we're stuck with as a community. I don't love it, but what's the alternative? To start taking out homes? So I would just encourage you to try to do what you can, get something to enhance our community, but let's try to get them open. That's my 2 cents. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks for letting me go on.
Thanks for your
I've had a
time.
lot of coffee today. Any questions for me?
No.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right, at this point, we'll bring on public comments. So if anybody out in the public would like to come up and speak, just remember to state your name and address for the record, if you don't mind. Go ahead.
I'm Nina Schatzkammer Miller, 36 Pricewoods Lane. 9270 Olive is a terrible location for a busy retail business, but especially this type. I frequently drive past Terabis, the dispensary at 1162 Olive and Creve Coeur at Mary Meadows, where there's a traffic signal. There's one entrance to the parking lot, and it's on Olive just east of the traffic light. The opening from the parking lot to Mary Meadows is exit only and is likely used primarily for patrons who want to go west on Olive using the traffic signal. The parking lot of the shopping center just east of Terabis is usually filled with cars parked near Terabis, presumably their patrons. Those cars have several entrance and exits onto Olive between the Mary Meadows light and the next one at Grazer. Since much of that strip mall is empty, there's always plenty of parking available, with the ability to get in and out easily via Grazer. There is no drive-through window. There are large evergreens and other trees, plus a fairly wide grassy strip that blocks view of this shopping center from the residents of Mary Meadows. Despite its apparent similarities, this location is not at all like 9270 Olive. There are only 19 houses on Mary Meadows, and there are 30 or more on Dolores, Tess, and Kenneth, plus another business that opens onto Dolores. There is no traffic light at Olive and Dolores, and no large grassy strip with tall evergreens. Currently, one cannot access the building from the Price Crossing parking lot, and that shopping center is filled with businesses, and the parking lot's frequently filled with their customers. If the design at that intersection is poor, don't make it worse. I never drive Olive eastbound between Dealman and Price, and because of the traffic and construction. Marijuana dispensaries are not just any retail business and should not be regarded as such. This is a brand new industry in our state, and our city should not rush into allowing these businesses. Remember, the federal law still considers marijuana to be a Schedule I drug with no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. Marijuana cannot be legally transported across state lines, even going from one state where it's legal to another. It cannot legally be taken into an airport or any other federally owned land or business. Your first responsibility is to the citizens of Olivet, not a prospective business owned by someone who doesn't live here and has no real interest in the community. This business will not improve the Olive corridor. It's not too late to simply declare a moratorium on allowing comprehensive dispensaries. These businesses do not fit the city's comprehensive plan. If Dolores is already too narrow, don't make it worse. The rendering of the building looks the same, except the windows are all covered. If the building already looks bad, why would you let him make it look worse? There should be no entrance and exit driveways to dispensaries on neighborhood streets. There should be a solid fence or tall evergreen trees, not shrubbery, between a dispensary and residences nearby. All along Olive, there are fences behind businesses to protect residents from the sight, sounds, and foot traffic from those businesses. This should be required. No drive-through options should be permitted for marijuana dispensaries, no matter the square footage of the business. It should be treated similarly to liquor sales. You can't go through Walgreens or CVS drive-through and buy alcohol. If the federal government should decide to make marijuana legal, it will be sold at pharmacies. And in my opinion, that would be a better way to do it.
Your time's, you're already over, so.
Okay, well, you let Greg talk, so let me talk one more minute, okay? I've already seen how the legalization of marijuana has affected Olivet. When going for a walk in Stacy Park on Easter Sunday, there was a large group using the pavilion with many of the people smoking pot openly. It was a windy day that day, and the smell went through the park. It was terrible. You cannot convince me that a dispensary near a park won't encourage people to walk down Dolores to the park and smoke there daily. This permit should be denied.
Next.
All right, I'll say it again. Raphael Timanson, 809 Newcastle Drive. In my view, the fact that this is a dispensary causes a lot of debate about social issues that I think obfuscate the real issue, which is that this location is just not a good location for a business with this much volume. And I know that there's some discussion about the traffic's not so bad suddenly after the traffic study. But if we look at the forecasts for revenue and other forecasts that were given, we're looking at forecasts that are of fast food restaurant volumes, maybe not McDonald's volumes, but medium-sized fast food volumes. And I think if you thought about that type of traffic in this residential location, it's just clear that the location doesn't work. I thought it might work if they would close off the entrance to Dolores, but it seems that all of the studies suggest, for whatever reason, that that cannot be done with the volume that's going to be at that business. And so the volume is just too big for that location. I think there are other locations. If you're worried about, we need to have a dispensary in Olivet. I think there are other locations. The ABC trading store seems like a great location for a dispensary or for any other retail business. And people in the neighborhood have mentioned other ones. But the location doesn't work. I want to note that the commission, and Carlos did say this, but this is my understanding from other sources, does have the right to say no to the permit if the location just doesn't make sense. It's not saying no to any other location. It's not saying no to these type of businesses. It's just saying this situation doesn't make sense. And the last thing I'll just say is, to me, the idea that we're going to put a dispensary in this location somehow for the comprehensive plan, or that this has to be solved, that seems like a discussion for something else. There's got to be other uses for the business, or else we should open it up and have a discussion about it. But that seems like a weird argument to make on that. So in the end, I just see this as a pretty simple case. Take out the marijuana, just think about, does it make sense to have a big volume business like this next to a location with already small street? The answer to me seems no. And because of that, when you eventually vote, I would ask you to kind of vote down this particular permit. Thank you.
Right.
Hi, everyone, it's good to be back. Ishan Desai, 9318 Kenneth. I saw the presentation. I just have a few more thoughts. I have 4 points. It'll be way under 3 minutes, hopefully. The first one is, I spoke to everyone in the neighborhood, a lot of new neighbors, everyone. I think I'm at like, I don't know the total count anymore, but like 25 or 27, whatever, it's because new neighbors alter my math. Only 2 people actually only have any moral objection against marijuana in general, just to be clear about that. Almost everyone, the 2 doors just didn't answer. Otherwise, there's unification in terms of the traffic. I turn in and out of Olive, maybe, or onto and off Olive, maybe 2-3 times a day. People are not courteous. I don't know if you guys know that. that big sign, I'm very grateful for it, that says stop for, you know, the oncoming traffic anyways. But let me get to my points. The parking, it's obvious, you guys hit onto it. Where do the employees park? A big concern of mine that I brought up before is that they might park at JBL Financial across the street, which would be sympathetic to them because JBL doesn't really have a lot of people who show up on Fridays in the afternoons, and they're not open on weekends. I don't want people walking back and forth in the street. It's so hard to get across anyways. And plus, once somebody walks across and a customer sees that, they're gonna go, you know, they're gonna say, hey, look at this person walking from this parking lot to the business. It's just gonna, you know, they're gonna see that as a viable pathway to go enter the building and park in that lot or park on the street. And that, I guess that's my first point. And then when we were modeling the traffic for the parking, we were doing volumes, I believe it was 80 customers per hour. Pardon my math, I don't remember that well for the last meeting. And at that meeting, they were talking about traffic guides, and I don't know if that's still relevant, but weekends like what's upcoming up, these big holiday weekends to me are much more alarming of, do we have 4 or 5 weekends a year that we have to be courteous of a business at the end of our streets versus our own, you know, needs for whatever we need for traffic reasons. And then in terms of just the dynamics of it, we want more stuff. I'm a new mover to Olivet, so I like nice new things. You know, I'm a 2-year resident, so I'm very pro new stuff. And for me, it's just, this thing is not necessarily accretive to Olivet as a whole. If this business were in ABC, I'm sorry, Vantage went away, but that was another viable choice. There's a couple of spots, Plant Haven, I think a UPS went in there, but as of last month, there were maybe 4 or 5 spots that were available. You can put them in a place that they can generate enough parking and enough business where it's better for everyone. You know, a little bit away from residents, enough parking, and we don't have to have meetings like this. Third big point, when we look at traffic across the St. Louis area, I gave you a, sorry for this, in the slide deck, like 16 different things. Okay, basically, I can do all 60. It's redundant in terms of, it's not a good plan or design, given the limited parking they have when you comp out all the dispensaries in the metro area, throwing out urban ones. When you have a uniquely poor design, you got to look at it and be like, well, maybe there's better spots that can go. And I think, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Jeff Schneider, 9324 Kenneth Place. Again, echoing a lot of what's already been said, parking is a major concern. It's been said multiple times in previous meetings as well that, you know, the street, Dolores Street is inadequate, and yet we want to throw a high volume, no matter which configuration, close Olive, don't, you know, it's still going to generate a lot of traffic on an inadequate street. I did find it somewhat interesting that whatever studies have been done and are saying, you know, not the greatest safety here and everything, that the people that want this are saying, yeah, you know, don't worry about that. I'm fairly sure if the studies had come back and said, it's perfect, no problems, we would have been hearing the exact, no, you know, it's a perfect, you know, thing to go with. So I would kind of question the thought that just ignore what the studies actually ended up saying in there. So,
Thanks. Anyone else? Seeing none in the audience.
Can I check online, sir?
Yeah, that'd be great.
1 second.
Oh, while we're waiting, did the civil engineer want to speak at all right at this point in time? Okay. Did anybody have any specific questions for him at this point? I know you haven't had a chance to thoroughly go through the report, but okay, not at this time. Thank you.
Chairman, if I can ask, if there's anybody online that would like to speak before the commission, if you can show your hand at the bottom center of the screen, and we'll bring you over as a commenter. I will note also to the commission that we did receive some correspondence. Those copies are attached to your packets that you received today.
Okay.
Carlos, could you talk to us about what the next steps should be?
1 second. at this point, the commission has heard, been introduced to the report that was provided to you today, along with the summary that I put together in there. And hopefully commission members have had an opportunity, of course, right now this afternoon to kind of take in that information in there. I think the summary is pretty accurate of what I've given you in there, but you're more than welcome to engage in it and read it further. It is up to the commission. I do have a motion prepared if the commission is ready, or if the commission would like to provide some direction to obtain whether it's additional information or give some time for the petitioner. And it might be something you might want to inquire, to look into, what other means can some of these issues be addressed. And I go with the parking, say where is it, and how absolute is it? I think is important. I still stress and I solely respect the different views and opinions. The analysis that I requested was to assess that peak hour, based on the current information that's available in there. And from a planning perspective, we generally don't design or write codes to meet a peak, or else, especially when you're talking about surface area and things like that, because then for every other hour beyond the peak hour, you're going to have these vacancies. And it's something for the commission to consider. I'm not advocating for that or not, but I don't want what I requested to be used as a means to interpret something differently. So that request was to look at it at that absolute peak hour. What are there? Were we way off or not? And I was happy with the results. I still believe they need to verify the additional parking, but it's within a reasonable means for them to try or attempt to do. So the commission can say, well, come bring it back. Let's see what you got in there. What other means I keep hearing is, concerns about, we need to further ensure that there's no parking in this residential area. And it's a hard thing to balance because we surely don't want to impede the residents parking within our public street in front of their homes, but we want to discourage, the street to be used for customer parking. There are means to do so. I mean, there's ways that you can do that if you think out of the box creatively, or just look at that, whether that's through signage, it's through paintings, that is through, I see in other communities where they have monument markers that you're now entering a resident area. There's traffic calming devices and different things that can be done to emphasize that you don't need to go beyond here. We surely would not allow them to gate a public street. This is a public street. It's not their street. This is a community street in that process. So I'm not advocating for that in there. The other thing, at least as a planner and going with the comprehensive plan again, is looking at this site and bringing that site to become part of our community, something viable, something dynamic. And this is an opportunity. Will it be the only opportunity? Probably not. But these are the same issues any other user from this point forward is going to have to face. We're going to be asking the same questions, even if it's a retailer in there. There's still legitimate issues of can you while you can meet the criteria of the code, is it reasonable to assume that you're going to have a peak hour where you're not going to have enough parking? And I think that's applicable to just about any use. So long story short, directly to your question, it's up to the commission. If in there, I always look at it as like, I would like to see more information submitted. I'm fine if that information is based on a condition, because I also know that some of this is a chicken and egg type of thing. It's like, how far am I willing to go? Now we want them to invest in the community. We want them to be upfront in there. But if the consensus or the overall feeling or sentiment of the commission is like, no, we just can't do this, then be upfront and say it. And that way we can part ways and move on. But if there are opportunities, again, having them come back or having some type of conditional or conceptual approval to keep the process moving. And that also helps in terms of everybody else to put some type of conclusion to at least some component of this process, whether it's going to happen or not going to happen. And if it's going to happen, then let's roll up our sleeves and get down to the specifics of, again, how are you going to manage that parking? How are you going to avoid people going down Dolores and Kenneth? And what are you going to do that's dynamic, in there? There may be other things that I'm not limiting the commission to other components in there and have them come back to the commission once they're set.
I think that's very good. I think that's appropriate. The only other thing that I would like to see is, in addition to the items that I mentioned before, what your signs are gonna look like. Just a rough idea. I mean, rendering or, drawn up so we can tell, and where they're gonna be on the, the monuments as well as the building.
Carlos, I think everything you're saying makes sense, because I agree, we need to be forthcoming on it. This would be a concern to me. The same issues would apply if it's a retail restaurant, right? The parking, especially if it's fast food. People say it's not dispensary, but obviously there's emotion around that. And then also we would have the ability to tell someone, oh, choose a different location. The land is purchased. This is what's in front of us, and we need to address it and make it a better spot. The concerns around Dolores, I think, are legitimate. I like that price crossing, saying they understand that it's likely to go through there, because that seems pragmatic to me. Is it even a viable option to close Dolores entrance and keep Olive and Price Crossing? Because it sounds like, as Mr. Yawat said, that's most likely going to happen anyway. I'm not saying it's a good idea or not. I'm curious, because that might alleviate some of the potential traffic concerns that the residents have on Dolores. Is that feasible, or is that something that we can't even get in front of?
In terms of,
if we said we don't allow an entrance as part of the special permit, we wouldn't allow an entrance or exit out of Dolores. Just keep Olive and the east.
So the main entrance would be through Price Cross.
Or Olive.
well, there's two purposes. I think, you're considering the variation of options that are available. From my perspective, again, obtaining the easement through the Shops of Price Crossing back in 2006, 2008, in that process was to ensure that, this site had an opportunity to access, to the signalized intersection at Price and Olive in there. But it was also to ensure that Dolores and Kenneth also had an option to utilize that same easement without having to get onto Olive, because we recognized, the configurations, and these are subdivisions, streets that have been built, years before most of us here, were not ideal. And, so yes, you could, but I think it's kind of contrary to what the purpose of obtaining that full easement would have been, but it's still there, at least providing, meeting part of the goal of the objective. I am concerned about the Olive entrance in there. I think, yes, it may be a means to mitigate the concerns solely of having too much of that volume on Dolores, but I think, it has a bigger impact on the corridor as a whole, and how that does that.
So you would agree with the parking study that closing Olive makes more sense?
A full access point there does not make sense. I thought a partial access point could work, like in only, that way they don't go through Dolores, but based on the report and their analysis, that's even worse in there. Now, is it an out only in
A right-hand turnout only.
Correct, but then that forces everybody, again, it's not forcing everybody, but it's one of the principal entrances, because there is another entrance on the eastern side off of the Shops at Price Crossing in there. So.
Yeah, that might push more people onto Dolores to try and make a left on Olive, which.
And long story short, I recognize I'm not answering your question directly, because that's what the special permit process is.
Yeah.
You have this flexibility. It's like, yeah, that's a good idea, but and on and on. And,
Yeah,
and
there's
there's
no
no right or
perfect-
wrong to that
There's no
decision.
perfect options. I think I'm like everybody trying to find a compromise, because the site needs to be improved, the business is legal. It's zoned appropriately, you know, I understand people don't like it, but again, I think the same concern on a certain restaurant, if it was a business that had one visitor a day. Okay, maybe not an issue, but that's not gonna happen. And then the challenge of, we can't demo it and rebuild it, because especially I always call that, we have issues with, you know, setbacks anyway, right? We'd say, no, can't build anything this big, so.
I'm wondering if it's feasible to move the olive entrance further east as a way to mitigate that potential issue where parties don't know if they're turning onto Dolores or turning into.
You know, on plan, it's a great question and observation. In reality, unfortunately, there is a topography change, and I'll bring you into the site and we'll take a look at it. It was something we looked into or considered, but you could see as you head at the edge of the site here where this Jeep is, that's probably about a 3 or 4 foot drop. Gotcha. In there, and then as you get towards the Shop of Surprise Crossings, you'll note that there's that bluff or drop in there. So can it be done engineering wise? I'm sure it can, but I think it would take, then we'd be back to reducing the number of stalls on the site, which is not just a concern, but even for a future use on the site, it would be difficult to then make that viable, taking those stalls out. It is a tough site, you know. Again, it goes back to, you know, and this decision I was involved in back in 2004, 2006, of pushing when the Shops at Price Crossing came in there, that we should have pushed it to acquire the properties to the west. But the council was sensitive that there was residential interest still on that corridor, and we didn't.
Go ahead, Carol.
I'd like to see the developer come back to us, and I'd like to know where employees are gonna park. And I think they're still working on that. And see what, if any, changes they could make to respond to Lot Miller's report, what they would recommend. 'Cause obviously, we don't have the answer.
Right.
But I'd like to see what they could suggest, what they might work out, and talk to Carlos and see what they could come up with. I'd be interested to see if there's something workable that they could manage to show us.
I agree, and I think that's probably the best way to go forward. Did you?
I would like to see us make, just like what Carlos is saying, make a commitment to them that says, hey, if they do the parking and they get the employee parking, they have, I wrote down, improve the building and bring the parking sign, put parking signs down Dolores and what their signs look like. And they bring that to us and we approve it. It'll give them the commitment to say, hey, this lot will be viable if you address these 4 items. And I think we need to make that commitment to them, as well as us up here, that we've been going through this for 3 months now, and move this thing along and say, hey, these are the 4 things. You guys address these 4 things, you guys are good to go.
But there's a lot of vagueness in some of that.
I agree.
Improve the building, what does that mean?
They have to come back to us and we have to approve that,
So we can't make action until we see it.
but
But I think
we
you're
gotta
right.
show a commitment to them, and I think that's what they're looking for too. To say, hey, if we do this and we approve the building and we do these things, are we gonna move forward with it? Cause if I was in their shoes right now, you know, I'd be, you know, this has been going on long enough.
Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I'd like to be able to make a commitment, but I think we need to see more before I'm willing to do that.
Okay.
I think the things that would be on the punch list of things they need to address are things that we've been talking about all along. We still have those same things. So I think we're narrowing down the focus of them, but there's still questions, and I'd like to see them come back with some good answers.
It's up to you guys.
I kind of agree with Carol on
Alright,
this,
yeah.
you know, so I'm not sure if anybody else has any thoughts on this, but I think I'd like to see how they address your review, the Lockmuir report, you know, see those renderings that we talked about. address the parking, the issue, and, kind of get a better idea.
I'm curious though, and just both sides of it, are you assuming they come back with viable options? It sounds like you think we're close to some areas. It's vague still, but you're open if those are addressed at a approachable. There's not a perfect solution to any of this, right?
Right.
So,
There isn't, and I'm obviously not looking for a solution, but, I'd like to see something moving towards a solution.
agreed. But to Carlos's point, I mean, I think if we were like, no solution that came before us, we'd be happy with, then I'd rather tell them that now, but I'm not hearing you say that. I'm not feeling that, but I just want to make sure.
And I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I think they need to show us more to get to that.
Maybe having two entrances, one off Dolores, one through Price Crossing with signage that would show it, because that would take more traffic off of Dolores, and potentially. But we'll talk.
This is not safe, that's too much. There's always mental.
Can you speak at the mic, please?
So what I was saying was I would actually be opposed to directing Dolores subdivision traffic through Price Crossing. My recollection from when I granted the easement was to connect the commercial corridor along the front so that the commercial building people could get through my lot to get to Price or make a left on Olive. But if you're talking about signage on Dolores directing that subdivision through the shopping center, that's a safety concern for me with all of our pedestrians and the traffic of people.
No, it's just to really provide another access point, to get into.
Oh, sure. I mean, the way their site plan's set up now, people could do it.
Well, they could do it.
Yeah.
If there was like a sign from Ross Crossing into, that area, or into Sunrise, people might be more inclined to pull
yeah.
into Price Crossing and go in, which ultimately takes traffic off of Dolores.
Yeah, I'd have to think about that one because if you're talking about signage on Price Crossings property for a neighboring tenant, for a different property, that gets sort of problematic for offsite signage and my tenant's going, hey, wait a minute, we can't have a sign up on the street. How come our neighbor gets one?
Yeah, well, you see what.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
trying-
with you. Look, I agree. This is rough. But what I think we all agree is nobody wants this ugly yellow building just keeps just sitting vacant. So, yeah, I'll put my thinking cap on. I'll call Neil if I come up with any ideas and see what, because again, I'm all Olivet all the time. So whatever I can do to help, just let me know.
Very good. All right. That being said, I don't see an opportunity right now to vote on this, and I think we all know kind of the marching orders, so I think we'll just table this and move on to the next line, unless there's any more questions or comments. Okay, good. Let's move on to new business. Item A, 15 Ramsgate Drive. Carlos?
Chairman, bear with me 1 second as I get the,
Just a reminder while we're waiting before we go to the next session, if there's gonna be some discussions, we do ask you to take it out into the hallway outside. And if it gets loud, to close those doors. All right, thank you.
Chairman, if you don't mind, if I can jump to 1 Marbrook before 15, I do have representatives for 1 Marbrook here, and
Yeah,
I don't
that's
see
great.
anybody for number 15.
Very good.
So if that's okay. For 1 Marbrook Lane, it's a proposed new single-family home. Sorry, I don't have the correct map on here, and I'll get that up for you in just a second here. It is at the north east corner of Marbrook Lane and Dealman Road. The existing house has been torn down. There's been a couple of new homes that have been built on the Marbrook street. This one would tear, well, again, the existing house has been removed. This would be a new, two-story house, in there, and, just getting straight to what issues or concerns we would have, on the proposal, and I'll show you the elevations, and you have those in your pocket, in there. This would be the primary front elevation of the building right here, which meets the spirit and intent of the Olivet Residential Redevelopment and Design Guidelines. Mr. Osinoff, the Osinoff Architecture, always does a really good job in terms of breaking masses, and in here he's kind of accentuating the horizontal component of this building, which some of the older homes still have or contain. So it doesn't look blocky, and it breaks and steps the mass nicely in there. This would be the Dealman elevation. The Dealman elevation would have the garage doors facing westward. So this is what you would see on Dealman Road. As you go down the corridor, it's not uncommon to have the garages facing Dealman in there. The concern here would be based on the residential redevelopment design guidelines. Again, the architect's done a great job in breaking up the mass. So you have almost three to four kind of a phantom different planes on Dealman, but the main plane, which is the garage doors here, and that are 1 story, it's my obligation to bring it to the commission that they would be short the 50% brick. This secondary plane here is it's about it is not too far from the primary plane here, and it also kind of lacks brick. As you get to the upper plane in this area, you're pretty far back, and I'm not too concerned about that, because you need to be able to visualize this in a third dimension in there. But I do bring to the commission's attention, whether additional brick should be required. Well, first, these will be street facing garage doors. Second, whether the current amount of brick is sufficient in there, or whether additional brick should be added in there. And I did discuss this with the petitioner in there. The last item is that there is an opportunity to connect the stormwater pit directly into the MSD inlet in there. We've had a petitioner who's done that several times and has utilized the same surveyor in there. And what we look for is that, and what we found that MSD seems to be acceptable with, that if you have your stormwater and you collect it and you run it to a pit where that pit can hold it in there, that they've been allowed to be released directly into the inlet, in there. And a licensed drainer has the authority to make that connection. And what I guess the process of why it's been acceptable for MSD is, again, that at that peak of that storm, all that rainwater is being collected from the gutters, and then it runs into the pit, and then the pit kind of holds it. So as that storm passes through, eventually that pit hits its peak, and then starts to releasing the rainwater that it collected. But the MSD infrastructure had already experienced the big rush that happened with the bigger storm. So what it does is it kind of releases it after the fact, so it's not overwhelmed all at once with that same storm. And again, we've done several of these on Kenneth. We've done it on Hilltop, and we even did one in Indian Meadows, where the developer connected the pop-up directly into the MSD inlet. So we would encourage that in that process. And yeah, I apologize. I must have deleted my pictures.
Take your time, Carlos.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all I have for you. If there's anything else, and again, the conditions on that I do have in the slide, and they are in your comments. The other items I think can be addressed. There was a question regarding the building orientation that's noted in there, and that's something it's overall it's compliant with code. But the way the zoning ordinance works, just for your info, is when when a property has two street sides as a corner, here off of Dealman, here off of Marbrook. Remember, we don't tell you where your front door should be, but we define the front yards, which are really street sides. The true front yard is always the street with the narrowest dimension, which in this case is Dealman Road. Even though all these houses face into Marbrook Lane, this Dealman Road is considered the true front given the narrowness of this property. What that does means that by code, the property line opposite the street side becomes the rear. So this is going to be the rear of the property. This becomes the other street side and this becomes the side of the property. So what they've shown here is reversed. But what they get is actually more buildable area in the end. And the full covered patio would be in compliance and they would have no issue with the setbacks here on the east side of the property.
Very good. Any questions or comments with Carlos? Okay, go ahead.
I'm just curious, looking at this rendering, Carlos, versus this one, it looks like there's brick. Is it white brick that I'm just not seeing on here?
Then I'll let the petitioner, the architect address, if you don't mind, sir.
Good.
The button is.
Press
on
the
the
button.
other And not on.
One more. Maybe.
Ah,
Oh,
Okay,
you
there we go.
there you go.
My name is Pavel Vanchuk. I'm the architect. Can I take a look at that?
Yep. I was just looking at this rendering versus this. Okay, that's what I was curious. I wasn't seeing brick, so I was just curious on. Thank you.
Well, here, any more questions?
What?
Any more questions?
No, the only other question is, would you be amenable to add that additional?
Correct. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we'll do it.
Good, good, good. All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm fine with it.
Go ahead, Carol.
Got one question. The location of the driveway, it seems pretty close to the entrance to the street at Dealman. And I'm just wondering, is that really enough distance there?
It would comply with code in terms of that there's a minimum distance from the curb to here, and that's 25 feet, and they do make the distance. And you are correct, the old driveway was actually on the eastern side of the property in there, and it's just a design aspect of it. The commission can express, and there, I understand why it's reversed, and that allows for the elevation on the east side to have the basement windows without going too deep or down in that process.
Carol, any other?
No, I don't have an issue with it really. It just seemed a little close to me and I just wanted to check.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because you're right, it does look close, so it's a good sketch. Yes, sir.
My name is
Here.
Efim Ryback. I'm one of the builders. I just wanted to clarify that one of the reasons is because on the east side, on the right side is where the master bedroom is. So the option to move it to the left side would not be available because then the master bedroom is next to Dealman. Because of the noise and the traffic and everything else, it just would be functional obsolete. You gotta move it to the other side.
Okay, good, good. Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments? Do I hear a motion? It's on the screen if you guys need a little help.
I'll make,
Go ahead.
all right, I'll make a motion to approve the petition for a community design and concept stormwater management plan review for a new single-family home at 1 Marbrook Drive as presented in a memorandum by the Department of Planning and Community Development dated April 20th, 2023, subject to any staff conditions noted therein, and specifically the brick call out that was made on increase of what percent, I guess, to
It was around the additional.
additional brick noted therein.
And
Go ahead, Carol.
if I could also amend that, we wanted the stormwater pit connected to the MSD.
Yes.
Yep.
Motion's been made. Do I hear a second?
And also,
And seconded. Carlos, will you please call the vote?
Yes, Chairman. Commissioner Wallach,
Approved.
Commissioner Spiegelglass,
Approved.
Commissioner Rosenberg,
Approved.
Commissioner Lewis,
Approve.
Commissioner Wagner,
Approved.
Chairman Dragell,
Approved.
and the motion passes unanimously 6-0.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Sorry you guys had to wait so long.
It's interesting.
All right, Carlos, what are we gonna do about 15 Ramsgate? Do you wanna?
Chairman, this is one of those that, under the code, when the amount of flat work or improvements on a lot exceed a certain size, we have to come back to the commission for what we call the site plan, community design and concept stormwater management review. And a majority of these cases, it's usually like it's two-dimensional work, but we still have to come forward to you in here. Pool is being proposed at 15 Ramsgate. They have a lot area close to about 24,000 square feet, which would permit, under code, they can have a total accumulated square footage of accessory structures not to exceed 10% of the lot area. In this case, up to 2,390 square feet. They're proposing to do quite a bit of improvements in the backyard in there, approximately 2,680 square feet, which is about 11% of the lot, which, looking at, not going through the full code, you was like, well, you can't do that. But in this case, we did an amendment where the pool only counts as 50%. And that brings them below the threshold to 9.5%. But again, the way the code is set up is that administratively, we're not authorized to allow the permitting until it's gone before the commission for the purposes of site plan, community design, and stormwater review. So the code also requires that they have to address stormwater on their site. And given the numbers that they're proposing, it needs to be provided on site. So they do have a detention pit that would be located. This detention pit would utilize, take some of the water from the hard surface areas here and also take some of the area of the roof to make up for the difference in there. Right now, this existing home does not have a stormwater detention pit that was provided in the property when it was constructed in there. Finally, is that we know this area within Ramsgate has had some flooding issues, and we've heard vocal concerns from residents in there about because it does get flat and the amount of water that it's taking from the surrounding area. In there, we are asking that as a part of the condition, and we've noted it to the petitioner, is that we need to work with their neighbors and meet with their neighbors to make sure that we're mitigating this well. The second thing is the city did contract with a outside consultant to do an analysis of that whole area and determine what efforts or things the city can do to mitigate the volume and the amount of stormwater that's going in there. One of those, of course, is none of these houses have stormwater pits. They were constructed prior. The pits have worked. Another thing about this site is that there is an inlet in the rear. And again, given that we've seen MSD allowing some of these pits to be directly connected into that inlet, we would like to see that, instead of the pop-up, releasing water here, just go in straight, go in through the inlet. And then, of course, that takes place underground. They're running a pipe and connecting to the MSD pipe underneath. It's not like there's going to be a pipe that runs to the top of the thing. It's all invisible. So,
But I thought we wanted to run on the ground to absorb into the ground.
we do, but also with the because there is a detention holding, which is that stormwater pit.
Yeah.
It serves the same thing.
Okay. makes sense.
You know, in that process. So we're still conducting that analysis about that area. We recognize that, we've heard from a lot of residents regarding some issues that the water just has nowhere to go in there. But we see a lot of these improvements that have been done. And this one would be required to have its own detention to accommodate that.
Would any of the adjacent neighbors be willing to put in their own detention?
I think we're going to see in terms of the consultant study that I think that's worth considering. I wouldn't I don't want to close any other options in there, or there's other opportunities to do. Ideally, I think would be to create a detention, a larger detention area. That can, take everybody's water in that place, but that requires a lot of coordination.
Okay. That's gonna be, that, do we need to wait for that draft, for that, stormwater review before we vote?
I don't think so. I think, again, the code permits the property owner to put a pool and to make those improvements as illustrated. They're not doing anything that is against the code. I would be concerned that telling somebody, no, they can't.
Yes.
In that process. They are providing that detention. I think, again, we would reach out to the adjacent owners and our consultant to kind of all meet on site, to talk about, if there are any impacts. If they are, this would have been the lowest site of this area here.
Okay.
So.
Good. Okay, any other questions or comments for Carlos? Seeing none, go ahead, Carol.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the petition for site plan and community design review and concept stormwater management plan review for an accessory structure improvement, including an in-ground pool, pool house and flat work at 15 Ramsgate as presented in the memorandum from the Department of Planning and Community Development dated April 20th, 2023, subject to staff conditions noted therein, including the condition that the stormwater consultant, neighbor, and petitioner representative visit and collaborate on best management practices for stormwater.
Motion's been made by Carol Wagner. Do I hear a second?
Second.
And second. Carlos, will you please call the vote?
Commissioner Wallach,
Approved.
Commissioner Spiegelglass,
Approved.
Commissioner Rosenberg,
Approved.
Commissioner Lewis,
Approved.
Commissioner Wagner,
Approved.
Chairman Dragell.
Approved.
The motion passes unanimously, 6-0.
Good. All right. Let's move on to other business meeting minutes.
I have none for review.
Good. We'll move on to reports. Carlos.
All right, again, stressing that we have a joint meeting with council next week. In there, we're gonna start at 7:00 PM. And again, I think I received the email to distribute to the council and commission for tomorrow regarding giving you some feedback and things like that. Representatives of the commission, which is the chairman, Vice Chairman Wagner, and Commissioner Lewis, have participated in one of the advisory committee workshops. There's a group that's working on behalf of the commission that includes some additional residents to help the consultants in this long-range planning process in there. Again, I encourage you and also to be advocates of getting neighbors, friends to register or get onto that site. There, it is important, and it does make a difference. I mean, the positions I take on the recommendations to the commission and decisions are based on the comprehensive plan. And I understand, the sensitivity and some of the other views in there, and that's why we're updating the plan to make sure that it's well representative of our residents that are here now in there. So it's important in there, and I encourage everybody to do so. The May 18th meeting is a big visioning workshop. This is the big opportunity to have the public, be able to chime in on the plan, and that is a scheduled PCDC date. So I think the intent was to have the commissioners here to participate and be part of the process, because it would have been your regular night in there, and we'll coordinate any petitions or applications that come in that process. And
Carlos?
yes,
The dates on there, we have got next regular agenda meeting. We've
yeah,
got six,
I think it's an older slide that
and
we had left over.
Yeah. There's a formula.
So sorry about that, Carol.
My apologies.
No worries.
Let that one slide.
And there, just a couple of notes, the UPS store, I believe that they've closed their facilities at Olivet Center, and they should be opening up at Plant Haven. next week in there, or they have just limited stuff that's there. And there's Scott Campbell, who's the operator, a great person to work with. And there has been anxious and eager to relocate for a long time, and it's come to fruition. So we're happy for him. Easy storage, you're starting to see, some of that mass come up. The two concrete pillars that are in there are the enclosed stairwell cases. It is a 5-level building, but it's not a 5-story building. The ceiling, the height ratios for the storage are significantly less than you would have like in one of the apartments or so. I don't know if I had noted to the commission that we had met with representatives of the Oliver, and they were down to 4 units that were not occupied of the 154 unit complex, which is pretty impressive. They've done very well in there. And then at a night with the mayor at Old Bottom School, of those 154 units, there's only a handful that have children that are going to the school district, and so things have balanced out well in there. And I thought that was impressive, especially comments we hear consistently about apartments and the impact to the schools. And the schools express their support to the mayor of the developments and the direction that the city has gone through that process. So that was good. And there, regarding Olive Crossing, the apartment complex has a designated name, and it would be called the Clover at Olive Crossing. I believe they've already started, or within the next couple of weeks, you can actually get a tour of the units, and their goal is to be able to open up by August of this year in there. We are waiting for the building permit plans for Lot 3, which is the building that would be closest to the basin and the ramps. That has come before the commission already in there. So the next part would be applying for the permits in there. And again, it's a 5-tenant building with the 2 end tenants being restaurants in there. And he's noted he's got some, he's got them under contract, but he hasn't revealed who they are yet. So in there. And then we anticipate that the office building component will be coming in sometime this summer. It's hard to say exactly which, to give you an exact month in that process. And I think that kind of covers most of it. Don, do you have any additional?
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Very good. Any questions?
The joint meeting, we had talked at one time, was there a meeting also for the CAC at 6 o'clock, or is it just a joint meeting at 7?
It is only the joint meeting at 7.
Okay.
I did look into there, and the advisory committee is scheduled to have a meeting early May, and I have to verify what that date is. I'm thinking it's the 11th. So,
Well, we will look into it.
so I know that'll keep you guys busy. Yes. And then it's my understanding, Mr. Chairman Dragell, you will be out on our first meeting in May. Is that correct?
It's changed, I think. So
Okay.
I think I should be in town. I'm leaving the next month.
All right. And again, anybody, if you have a conflict, give me a heads up. It just helps so we know in that process, or if we're close, we can start talking with the petitioners that things are up in the air.
If
Oh,
you could send us the list of dates, that would be great.
Okay,
I need to get them on. That would be good.
absolutely.
I would add that the workshop will be a family-friendly event, so please encourage everyone to come out, bring their families, and there will be fire trucks. That should be fun.
All right, Missy?
All right, thank you very much. Shakira Buchanan, welcome. Many years may you be here, as many years as me and Carlos. And make the city wonderful with this wonderful board. Carlos really went over everything. Again, encourage everyone else to get involved. And I can honestly say it's really been humbling and an honor to get the first paperwork, the first land plan where we're at today, because I can honestly tell you, I knew what I wanted for the city for 10 years, selfishly for the city. You've done a great job. All those things have been achieved, or they're being built. I don't know what is for tomorrow. I don't even know in my own mind what is for tomorrow, the way I knew what tomorrow needed to be looking like 20 years ago. So it is exciting. I want you to bring those people out. Ideas are absolutely needed and necessary, and it's an exciting time. The only other thing that I'm gonna say that you're all probably curious about is, yes, we are in the rounds of interviewing for a new city manager. Things are going well. That's about all I can tell you. All right, all right.
Mayor, can you go over next week in terms of the process council goes through?
You mean, so when we go through the second round of interviews?
The council selecting like the officers.
Oh, the reorganization. Okay, all right, okay. Yeah, that's just so common to me that it's. So yeah, so the next city council meeting is the typical reorganization of the council. Once the votes from the election have been certified. And so at the next city council meeting, we will sit there and identify the mayor and the pro tem and the liaison to various boards and commissions. The two most important things I guess we have to do every April after we vote. I really have nothing else other than, again, thank you and appreciate what you do. Mr. Wallach, welcome aboard. It's wonderful to see some of the great faces and new faces. So that's it.
All right, good. Well, thanks, everybody. I think that's about it. So we'll adjourn at 9:06.
Thank you, Chairman.
Try to get under.
Did-